Okay, hi everyone. Thank you to the organizers of the SDG16 Conference for providing this space for civil society. This has been an ongoing collaboration between the conference organizers and civil society partners working on SDG16 Plus to be able to showcase and highlight some of our insights into this conference on a yearly basis in every iteration of this SDG16 conference. So again, thanks to the organizers for continuously providing this space for civil society to provide our insights and inputs. This process, presenting of the Rome Declaration, the 2025 edition, this process has been facilitated by the TAP network and the Civil Society Platform for Peacebuilding and Statebuilding. And for those that are interested in kind of following along this session and the insights that we'll provide from the declaration itself, the Rome Declaration is available on the conference website, so feel free to unpack that on your own time as we go along here. I won't go into much detail about the details on the challenges and opportunities. I think we'll unpack plenty in this first session and for the rest of this conference. But I think we all know that we are facing a convergence of crises on many fronts. I think this is also really telling for us in terms of the process for this Rome Declaration. This is a collaborative effort. We do this every year with inputs from dozens or hundreds of civil society organizations, providing inputs and insights, priorities, challenges, opportunities for where SDG16 is and where we need to go. And I think it's very telling that this year we had, I think, an unprecedented response to the consultation. I think in many ways due to the immense challenges that many of our civil society colleagues are facing on many fronts with shrinking civic space, financial challenges, and we'll unpack some of that throughout this discussion here. But I think it says a lot about the urgency of the moment that we're faced with today. The Rome Declaration also features 366 endorsements from civil society organizations from all around the world, from over the past iterations of this declaration. And for those that are interested in joining and endorsing the declaration, please do let us know. I won't go into detail again on the chapters. We'll have some time to unpack all of this, but all of these chapters really include some background and context, but also really concrete recommendations for the international community to take forward, and in particular, really focus on upcoming opportunities this year, like the Financing for Development Conference, World Social Summit, UN 80, and others that we've heard from about already today. So. We have a number of colleagues here to present some of this content from the Rome Declaration and also speak to some of their experiences at the national level, in particular around some of these challenges or opportunities. So with that, we are very short on time, so we'll try and be as efficient and succinct as possible. I think we have a lot of practice with that as civil society. But first I'll hand over to our colleague, Peter Van Slijs, who is the coordinator of CSPPS, and again, one of our co-facilitating partners for this entire process, to walk us through the preamble. So over to you, Peter.
Thank you, John, and a pleasure to be here in this panel, joined with so many of my precious colleagues. Allow me to speak about the preamble and a little bit about the content of the 2025 Rome Civil Society Declaration. The declaration is called A Compass for Navigating Through the Geopolitical Storm, and it's launched today as a result, as John already said, of a consultative process involving civil society actors from across the globe. The declaration presents both an analysis of the current trends as we see them evolving and also impacting SDG16, while also presenting concrete recommendations for revitalized action on SDG16+, to which we hope the international community can forge ahead and resume its course towards 2030. As we approach 2030, it's imperative to assess the widening gap between the rhetoric and reality. The world faces unprecedented geopolitical storm that further hinders the progress towards SDG16. In this challenging context, civil society is on the front line of the pursuit of more peaceful, just and inclusive societies. The 2025 Rome Civil Society Declaration on SDG16+ is launched at a moment where we, as civil society, see ourselves being stripped from resources, many of which are now being redirected towards military spending at the expense of peace building and conflict prevention. At the same time, we see civic space continue to shrink, access to justice severely eroded, and the vision of peaceful societies, especially in fragile and conflict-affected settings, risks slipping further out of reach. In this context, civil society have come together to draft this declaration to advocate to the international community to maintain a steadfast course and commitment towards upholding the values and principles that foster peaceful global governance. Strengthening global governance has been recognized as a key action for strengthening multilateralism. However, multilateralism, as we have heard speakers before, is faltering and it's caught in a grip of overlapping existential crises that leaves it ill-equipped to pursue and achieve sustainable development that leaves no one behind. In the face of mounting global instability, the 2025 Rome Civil Society Declaration issues an urgent appeal to governments, multilateral institutions, donors, and all stakeholders that they must decisively reorient global priorities towards peace, justice, and inclusion. The time for incremental responses has passed. Only bold, coordinated, and systemic action to address the root causes of conflict, to strengthen institutions, and protect the rights and dignity of all people is needed. As SDG16 acts as a blueprint to address these challenges, it's more than ever and relevant to use it as a steadfast compass to navigate through the current geopolitical storm. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much, Peter, for those insights on the preamble. I'll turn now to our colleague Natalia Palez Perez, who is the founder and director of Fundación Latir, based in Colombia. So over to you, Natalia, on the peace and conflict session.
Thank you. I'm going to turn to Spanish, so you can use your headphone. Hemos escuchado durante la mañana de hoy un montón de cifras sobre el incremento de la inversión en la militarización. Hemos escuchado que la inversión en construcción de paz está en su pico más bajo en los últimos 15 años y hemos escuchado sobre la cantidad de personas que han sido desplazadas forzadamente de los territorios, niños, niñas y adolescentes víctimas del reclutamiento, el uso y la utilización en la guerra. Y yo solo me pregunto, ¿estas son solo cifras? Detrás de cada persona que está empuñando un arma hay una historia. ¿Ustedes la conocen? Cuando me doy cuenta, yo trabajo en lo local, en lo territorial, y cuando me doy cuenta de estas cifras a nivel global, me pregunto por la burocracia, me pregunto por la corrupción, me pregunto qué tan contextualizadas están las inversiones que se están haciendo para financiar la paz. Y definitivamente, si vamos a hablar de esta sección de la declaración que nos invita a pensar cómo transitar del conflicto a la cooperación, necesitamos enunciar estas problemáticas porque es necesario cambiar la estructura de financiación que hay en este momento. No puede ser que la escasa, limitada financiación y decreciente en la construcción de paz se pierda en procesos burocráticos. No puede ser que no incluyamos a las comunidades locales, a esas que son las que conocen más de su propia historia que cualquiera sentado en esta mesa el día de hoy. Cuando yo estudiaba psicología, decíamos, nadie sabe más que su propia vida que uno mismo. Y quiero que sepan que en los territorios las comunidades ya tienen estrategias que les han permitido frenar la violencia o alzar la voz. Y yo he tenido la oportunidad de compartir con comunidades indígenas en Colombia, como el pueblo Yanacuna, y hablar con una niña de 8 años que me decía, nosotros vamos a salir a exigir nuestros derechos y si matan a uno, venimos 100. Porque la violencia no nos va a silenciar, nos va a hacer más fuertes. Y como sociedad civil, le hacemos el llamado a toda la cooperación internacional y a los Estados miembros para que articulemos acciones, porque es evidente que los Estados no van a lograr alcanzar la paz solos. Y aquí estamos nosotros sentados y diciendo, articulemos, hablemos, escúchennos, porque incluso la financiación va a ser mucho más eficientemente utilizada si hacemos esto de manera cooperativa y lo hacemos juntos. En la declaración van a encontrar 4 recomendaciones puntuales y no me detengo en ellas porque siento que aquí tenemos que hablar de experiencias y de historias y conectar emocionalmente con eso que ocurre en los territorios y de los que muchas veces nosotros aquí estamos distantes. Muchas gracias.
Great, thanks a lot for sharing your insights on the peace and conflict section, Natalia. We'll move next to the financing for SDG16 plus section. We have with us Mojisola Akinsanya, who is the Executive Director for Women for Peace and Gender Equality Initiative based in Nigeria. So over to you, Moji.
Thank you. Communities on the front line of conflicts, they need more than just promises. They need resources. So let's channel sustainable financing to grassroots organizations, driving peace and justice where it is needed most. We can't afford to ignore the power of local peace builders. Let's prioritize funding for grassroots mediators, youth leaders, and civil society organizations, recognizing their role as frontline responders while safeguarding their ability to work without fear or interference. We want to make sure that we imagine a world where funds spent on weapons are redirected to provide access to justice and prevent conflicts. It is not just a financial shift, it is a step towards lasting peace. And we cannot afford to ignore all the local peace builders. In these turbulent times, SDG16 is not just a framework, it's a lifeline, and let's commit to financing initiatives that bring hope, stability, and justice to those most affected by conflict and instability. To truly advance SDG16, we need transformative financial reforms, from taxing the ultra-wealthy to tackling illicit financial flows. And this isn't just about money, it's about justice, accountability, and making sure resources reach those who need them most. Thank you.
Great, thanks for those insights, Moji. Over to the section on civic space. I'll turn over to our colleague Manal Banani, who is with the Sustainable Cooperation for Peace and Security and Africa Europe Foundation from Algeria. So over to you, Manal.
Thank you so much. First of all, I would like to thank you for the opportunity. I feel very privileged, but with privilege comes responsibility. Today, and as a scientist, I like to speak in figures, so do allow me to reiterate the risk that we're living today. 72.4% of the global population today live under highly oppressive civic conditions, with 1.5 rise only in the recent year. 40 out of 198 member states of the UN are considered to have an open civic space. That means 20% of the global nations. In 30 countries, even minor dissent can result in long-term imprisonment and death. So yes, today we need to push for the protection of civil society, We need to safeguard fundamental freedoms. We need to ensure genuine civil society participation and use diplomatic and economic pressure against repressive regimes. We have to protect at-risk activists and organizations if we want civil society to be resilient and to survive this. Second, 1,350 violations of rights to peaceful assembly and association recorded only in 2024. 49 countries recorded violations against freedom of expression, with 45% of all documented cases with journalists and activists, whether detained, assaulted, or harassed, for exposing corruption. In recent elections, over 40% of countries experienced violence, candidate assassination, or suppression of opposition. So we need to guarantee inclusive participation. We need to establish legal frameworks for meaningful participation of marginalized groups, including women, youth, indigenous people, persons with disabilities, and minorities at all governmental levels. Access to information is increasingly restricted, with independent media under siege. 76 countries documented as targeting the right to protest through mass detention. Multilateral institutions are failing to hold perpetrators accountable, with gross human rights violations going unpunished and fueling a dangerous might-make-right global order. So we need to strengthen accountability. We need to support and fund national human rights institutions and abroad offices. We need to expand press freedom while combating misinformation responsibility. We have to adopt strong freedom of information laws, back international justice mechanisms like the ICC. Finally, 2025 State of Civil Society report warns us that international cooperation is breaking down, with powerful states ignoring or selectively applying international law. I think we all can recall at least one or two events this year that this had happened repeatedly. Civil society voices are increasingly excluded from global forums. The normalization of creating satellite spaces for civil society actors rather than the main spaces for decision-making undermines the global efforts in addressing the current crisis that we're living in today. So we need to enhance global representation. We need to collaborate. I think it's needless for me to remind you all that we cannot afford to work in silos anymore. We need to work hand in hand. And being here today means that today, more than ever, we have to work together. And we have to stop pointing fingers for blaming each other. A thriving civic space is not a threat. It is the strongest defense that we have today against injustice, inequality, and instability. We need to protect it. We need to expand it, and we need to take it. We need to not take it for granted. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks very much, Manal, also for the very specific recommendations. Next, I'll turn over to Musa Ansumana Soko, who's from the Youth Partnership for Peace and Development and WashNet, based in Sierra Leone. So over to you, Musa.
Distinguished delegates, we are witnessing alarming rise in civil society repression around the world, even in long-standing democracies. This is not only a threat to civic actors, it is a direct attack on foundations of democracy, accountability, and human rights. Civil society is not optional. We are watchdogs, service providers, and accountability drivers. Yet we face surveillance, criminalization, shrinking space, especially for those in the front lines. We call on governments to protect civic space and fulfill commitments to SDG 16.10 by enacting laws that enable, not restrict, public participation, and by supporting those under threat, including activists, journalists, and grassroots groups alike. Democracy cannot survive without inclusive participation. Women, youth, indigenous populations, migrants, and other historically excluded groups must be brought into decision-making, not excluded further. It is time to stand with civil society, not in words, but through funding, protection, and meaningful inclusion. The future of democratic governance depends on it, because none of us is safe until the rest of us is. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks very much, Musa. And last but not least, I'll hand over to Andrews Kananga, who is the Executive Director from Legal Aid Forum Rwanda, based in Kigali. So over to you, Andrews, please.
Thank you very much, distinguished delegates. Thank you for the opportunity to speak about one of the components of our declaration, the Rome Declaration, which is safeguarding and expanding justice in all its forms. Since the adoption of SDG16 almost 10 years ago, there has been growing and widening gap in access to justice, whereby it's believed that over 5 billion of the world's population has no meaningful access to justice, and their justice needs remain unmet. We continuously see politicization of the judicial system, and has been spoken about this morning, increasing inequalities when it comes to accessing services, including justice services, heightened risk of conflicts and instability, especially in the regions where I come from, sub-Saharan Africa, and of course other regions, erosion of trust in our government systems and institutions. Needless to say is the fact that our justice systems are chronically under-supported and underfunded. Globally, governments invest 1.5% of their national budget into justice, and official development aid accounts for only 1% that goes into access to justice initiatives. With that in mind, the declaration recommends 4 things. One is to scale up funding for grassroots justice initiatives. And for us from the African continent, we know how grassroots movements have been, at the forefront and making sure that our marginalized population and excluded members of the community are able to access justice. These are important movements within our communities because they have experience, they live within the community, they are trusted, and the funding for this cannot be expensive. So we call on governments to invest, development partners to invest in supporting grassroots justice initiatives. We have many that we can give examples, especially in East Africa where I come from. Promoting and supporting community-based informal justice systems that abide by human rights standards. And here we are talking about mediation, alternative dispute resolution. It has worked in many countries, including my own country, Rwanda, where after the genocide against the Tutsi, we relied mostly on people I would call paralegals, who were able to resolve a lot of cases related to genocide. Ensure people-centered outcomes by centering policy-making around all forms of justice. We must ensure that decision-making and policy-making take into account the needs of our people. And last but not least, promote the universality and effectiveness of international justice mechanisms. Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks very much, Andrews, for those insights. I think I won't try and summarize because I think the perfect summary is found in the Rome Declaration itself. So maybe I'll give you all some homework for the lunch break to read through the Rome Declaration, encourage you to unpack it a bit deeper, much further. There's quite a bit of detail in there with very specific recommendations as well for different stakeholder groups that are important for SDG 16. I think for us as civil society, I think what's clear, and I think was mentioned a few times previously as well, is that civil society is as committed as we've ever been, acknowledging the risks to SDG 16 on all fronts and the backsliding progress. And I think the main point also to make here in the context of today's times is that this is all in the face of, I would call them what we could consider existential threats to civil society. It comes in the form of financing, which we've heard from these insights just now, in the form of shrinking and closing civic space. It comes from reprisals against civil society and activists in many countries. I think on many, many fronts, civil society, again, we are as committed as we've ever been, acknowledging the challenges in front of us, and it's in the face of these existential challenges. So I think that's one thing, if we can use this as kind of, as Peter had mentioned, a compass for our future discussions here today and going forward, the next 5 years until 2030, make sure that that is in the back of our heads. It obviously is for civil society dealing with this, especially colleagues at the national and local level dealing with these existential crises. We call on member states and the international community to really keep this in mind as we go along. And also, not to speak too soon about it, but also what comes after the 2030 agenda, I think is also incredibly important, because we do risk, in light of backsliding progress, we do also risk SDG 16 itself in what comes next, post-2030. So with that, I hope that has provided some good food for thought for the lunch break and for the rest of the day. I think there's a lot more to unpack over the next, over the afternoon. So really encourage all of you to come back after the lunch break, hopefully well-fed and well-equipped for future discussions. I know there's a really great interesting conversation on making the business case for SDG 16 after the break. How do we bring some of these conversations that we have amongst ourselves here at the UN, how do we make it relevant and make the business case or whatever case for others to also join forces and care and invest in SDG 16 on all fronts and bring in as many partners as we possibly can from different sectors. So again, a lot of interesting conversation here for the rest of the day, so look forward to all of that. Again, if you are interested in unpacking the Rome Declaration or even endorsing it, there's more information on the conference website, so I would also encourage more colleagues to also reach out and engage with us on the Rome Declaration or the work of our networks overall from here. So look forward to seeing you all in the afternoon after the lunch break, and thanks again to the organizers for providing this space for us every year at this conference to share insights across civil society. So thanks everyone. We'll see you in the afternoon.